Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom. Thanks always to my engineer, Paul, for making me and my guests always sound so good. Today's episode is sponsored by my friend, Jeff Martin. And Jeff's from Collective Genius. What they do at Collective Genius, they build high-performing teams for venture-backed growth companies and venture capital firms. And what I really like, Jeff does a bunch of things, but I really like their offering called Peak Planning. We're at this time of year, and maybe even Dick and I will talk a little bit about this, but a lot of companies are starting to think about planning for their next year. And Peak Planning is a facilitated leadership team session, and they have tools, and they'll help facilitate getting the team more closely aligned to create focus and accountability. And so he can help lay out a 3-year vision, a 1-year plan, and even those quarterly goals and what many people now use are called OKRs, and the tools to stay on track. And so we're at that time of year where people, especially CEOs, are starting to think about taking my team off site and spending some dedicated time. So if you're interested in talking to Jeff more about Peak Planning, definitely hit me up or let me know, and I'm happy to make an introduction there. So I'm super excited. I get to have Dick Gochnauer here with me today. And before we get to hear the amazing story of his career and all the wisdom that I always am able to glean from Dick, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is, first of all, amazingly busy. And so I'm so grateful that he's even spending the time that he is with us today. He's the co-founder of the CEO Leadership Alliance of Orange County, which he and Doug Wilson created, and has become really the clear venue for the leaders in Orange County's largest companies to collaborate on some of the key strategic issues that are facing us here. And I'm so appreciative that they have inspired this group to come together and to lean in on some big issues with some urgency that are facing us if we don't work together as a community to really address. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today. And they're working together with the goal to build a more competitive ecosystem and really continue and even improve the quality of life that we have in the region. And so their mission is to create a thriving OC for us all. I don't know that there's anyone here in Orange County that wouldn't get behind that. And so we'll dig into a little bit more about what that actually means. He's also been involved on a national level with a group called the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership, where he's a board member. And they believe that and have proven that the best run, best performing companies are those that do more than just maximize shareholder value. They actually value improving outcomes for all stakeholders involved in a company. And so that really drives who Dick is and how he leads. And I think in all the people I've talked to that have worked with and around Dick, they've always found that ability to look beyond just that shareholder and to have a really strong values and purpose orientation has driven him throughout his career. Dick walked the walk as a leader in both public and private companies. He's the former CEO, president, and COO of United Stationers, which was a big public company in Chicago. Prior to that, he was the president and COO of Golden State Foods here in Orange County. And he currently is on the board of a number of companies, including Golden State Foods, AmerisourceBergen, and UGI Corporation. He's also a trustee of Rush Medical Center in Chicago, and he's the lead director at a startup there called Vidori. He is what I would call a great example of an innovative and values-driven Orange County leader. We can never have too many of those here, in my opinion. Dick, it's so great to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Kerry. And thank you for hosting and creating this Accelerate OC talk program. It's an important way that we can connect our innovation ecosystem. And so thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm having so much fun, and I get the great pleasure of getting to spend time with folks like you. And as I've said to many of my prior guests and others in the community, I'm so blessed to know so many great people here, and to be able to record our conversations and share them with others here, I think is an important part of building this community. And so thanks for spending the time. Let's get to the starting line. So I mentioned your involvement with the CEO Leadership Alliance. Tell the audience how it got started.
Well, I'll take you back to when I was CEO of United Stationers, because it really started, there. It was a turnaround situation when I was brought in as CEO, and we started focusing on culture and creating a high-performance company focused on values, et cetera. And one of the things I had initiated was to create a foundation to get our employees involved in giving back. And the purpose of the foundation, I challenged the group, was to do one thing, which was to teach our employees the joy of giving back. And as time went on, we were being quite successful in this transformation, but I was not able to figure out how to connect what we were doing in our community involvement with our business strategy. And so our folks out of HR said, well, what we need is a purpose. And I thought, well, what do you mean purpose? This is business, right? But more I thought about it, I said, all right, let's give it a shot. And we were delivering, technology and pencils and paper and everything for the office. And it wasn't, if we missed a delivery, the world was not going to stop. So it's a little more difficult to identify your purpose as opposed to somebody in the medical space, for example. But we did, and we found that it actually linked together what we were doing both outside of the company and in the company and our business strategy, and it took off. And our employees became really quite thrilled with the opportunity to give back, and we brought the heart into the business equation. And when you bring the heart in, as well as the head and the hands, you unlock all kinds of energy and passion and commitment that you wouldn't otherwise get. We also found that our employees got so excited about it, they were talking to customers, and we were able to crack a code, a barrier that we weren't able to do before, which was get our small businesses to trust us, turn over business processes to us. A Fortune 500 company, they were small, they say, well, I'm not going to do that because you'll be able to control my company, and we couldn't break through. And when they heard our employees talk about all the stuff we were doing in the community, and they were so thrilled about it and were energized, they said, well, what does this have to do with making money with a public company? And they said, well, maybe we can trust them, and things led from there, and it became the central competitive differentiator for our company in the industry. And we took off, and we became the darling of the industry. So while that was going on, Michael Beer and Russ Eisenstadt, two former HBS professors, were writing a book called Higher Ambition Leadership. And they were just concluding the book. They found out about what we were doing at United Stationers. They came out and did a case study, which is a Harvard Business School case study today used in the classroom. And out of that, I became part of an initiative to start the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership in Boston with Doug Conant, who was CEO of Campbell Soup, and the CEO of Beckman Dickinson. And that group was what we created was a CEO-led organization where CEOs were going to learn from each other, because the concept of a purpose was not a business term. It was a personal term, but not used in business. And our thought was, if we could get CEOs to understand how powerful it is and to focus on it, we could address some of the problems we had and have had in quite some time that companies are focused on return to shareholders as the preeminent value that they're trying to create, and turn that around. And out of that work was born the CHL. And one of the things that I did there was take CEOs around to visit other companies that were particularly far along in this journey. So one of the companies that I took them to was Thrivent in Minneapolis, which is a financial services company, life insurance company. And they had a purpose, which was to teach their members how to be wise with money and to live generously. Okay. Very powerful, and they gave away at that time, I think, $250 million a year to support that purpose into communities. But their CEO was also chaired an organization called an organization of CEOs in Minneapolis that was working on solving social and economic problems, ITASCA. And so we studied that as well. So our CEOs learned not only what was going on at Thrivent, but they also found out about this effort to weigh in collectively to solve these issues. And it was out of that was born the concept for me, as well as one other thing, which was our group of our CEOs during the Ebola crisis. It was a disaster. We weren't ready for it. It was pretty clear that we weren't, as a globe, we were not ready for pandemics. So they got together with the World Health Organization and others and created a plan to solve for the next pandemic, which will come, so that we're better ready to address it. So I looked at those two initiatives and said, all right, when I moved back here to Orange County, how do we get something similar going here? I chose geography as the glue. And so I got Doug Wilson, my good friend. We started going around and meeting CEOs and challenged him, would you like to get together and learn from each other best practices? It took us a while. But one early meeting, I asked the question, how would you like to work collectively together to solve local social and economic problems you can't solve individually? And that's out of that, the energy in the room went way up. The passions came out. And what we found was there was a lot of energy around this. And so we started the CLA, which is a CEO-led organization. And it was somewhat unique because we have a number of organizations, great ones in Orange County and elsewhere, that involve company people, but the CEOs really don't weigh in personally. This is an organization where we don't do anything unless a CEO is leading it. So that's how I got started.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that context, and what an amazing journey. And, you know, as I've said, I think we so benefit here in Orange County from having you back here, having you leading the way and bringing this group together. So I've gotten the benefit of getting a little bit more behind the curtain of some of the things that are going on at CLA. So as you think about this group, obviously CEOs tend to be a very driven type A group. They're not going to just get together and chat. They're going to want to see real impact out of the things that they're doing. So as this group's gotten formed, what are some of the key initiatives that you're starting to see them weighing in on and wanting to see move forward?
So that's always a challenge. So there were a number of things that guided us, but clearly we wanted to have one foot over in social issues and 1 foot over in economics. And the more we studied all the issues that Orange County faced, which is not unsimilar to many cities and counties, we realized that you almost couldn't separate the two. They were intertwined with each other, and so what we then decided to do is to say, figure out where there are leverage points. By either solving a social problem, you addressed an economic problem, or where you have an economic problem, you can solve a social problem. And so we've decided to weigh in several areas. The other criteria is we needed a CEO who had passion about it and would lead the initiative. So one of them is around talent. And we'll talk later about talent and how important it is. But we got together, Jim Morris at Pacific Life is leading that, the CEO. And we've gotten together, I think, something like 15 or more now, CHROs from various corporations around here. We did a study, what are the issues? And we're weighing in on a number of issues around how do you attract the talent we need here, and how do we grow that talent, and then how do we keep it, okay? And what relationships do we need to have with both starting at the elementary school level all the way up through community college or college level for different types of jobs. So that's one of them. A second one was around child hunger, because we realized that one of the barriers early on in Orange County and it's elsewhere is that a large percentage of our kids go to school hungry, and there are a lot of studies that show a kid who's hungry doesn't learn. So how do we address that? And so we started an initiative there. We look for some quick wins, and we look for championing initiatives that if we could prove a concept, you could roll it out and grow it and expand it. The third one we looked at is just Orange County itself and the branding. We are at a disadvantage because we're not a city center. We're a county. And in fact, we're often viewed as just a bedroom community of LA. The sign that says when you're coming here from the desert, it says LA this way and beach cities
Exactly.
down south. So creating identity for Orange County, which Orange OC Talk Radio is a great way to do that as well. And so we've launched a website, and we are hopefully we'll have this talk radio on that site and other vehicles by which we start to address what is Orange County and why is it a good place to live and work, and then provide services to people. So that's an initiative. And then finally, we spent a fair amount of time around the issue of jobs and realizing that the jobs the studies were done in Orange County that shows are good jobs, the ones that pay enough money for people to live and work here, were flat. And the growth area was all service jobs, and the service jobs pay was flat, so they were not getting increases over the last 10 years significantly above cost of living. And yet, at the same time, housing costs are going up 7% a year. And what's happened to our population in the service community is it's getting more and more difficult for them to live here and work here. So they're having to live further away, travel longer distance, clogging up and spend hours on the road each way in order to survive, or combine in multiple families in one apartment. And so addressing the job side is one of the solutions to addressing. If we can get more of their children educated, and UCI does a great job with it, and some of the other universities where they have half of their student bodies being their first time ever
amazing.
In going to college. The problem is they're graduating these kids who want to come back and help their families, and yet we don't have jobs for them. Okay, so without addressing the jobs, what's happening is we are exporting this talent elsewhere, and many of them don't want to leave, so they're taking lower paying jobs just because they can stay close to their family. So in order to weigh in and do this, we're addressing the whole ecosystem, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but the innovation ecosystem. How do you get it going? What are the gaps, and what do we need to do to make that the driving force for growth?
That's great. I mean, I'll just reiterate again that I have a lot more confidence in our ability to move this forward with folks like you involved. So
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. So let's go under the hood just a little bit. I think it's great to see this group of CEOs that otherwise could be doing other things with their time so activated and engaged and committed to the fact that Orange County's not going to become an innovation center by itself, that we all need to be paying more and more attention to this. And that's why I get so excited when I see these kinds of new initiatives going. As you think about that, it's not going to happen just because of a group of CEOs. We need to get as many people here to lock arms and get involved and engaged. So as you think about other groups or other initiatives that the community should be thinking about, are there any that are on your mind? You say, we need somebody outside of this group of CEOs to really go do these things.
Yes, and as our purpose statement says, working together to create a thriving OC for all. One of the precepts and concepts of the group, the CLA group, is that we don't want to create anything that already exists. We want to help existing entities, nonprofit or for-profit, thrive. And our role is oftentimes to get people to work together, to collaborate where they aren't collaborating now, or to identify where there are gaps and we need to fill those gaps. And without our weighing in, those gaps are not getting filled. And a perfect example of that was capital. So if we started looking at the job situation, and we started reaching out to McKinsey and the consulting firms and said, okay, why are we not thriving in job creation? What's going on here? And it's like a tale of two cities. We have the really high income people here and retirees, and then you have the service workers. And we aren't creating that middle we need to thrive. So when we looked at what were the gaps, One of them was there was no group, because it's a county, there's no city center.
Sure.
So there wasn't an organized group to start to say, how do we address this? And so we said, okay, as CLA, let's see if we can step into that void. We have a number of fabulous organizations like Octane and the Cove that are trying to fill that gap, and they're doing a wonderful job. And we want to encourage them and support them as much as we can. But we also needed something else, which was capital. And when we looked at what it took to create a thriving innovation economy, the first thing you had to recognize is, why is that important? And so there's a book out, which was written a few years ago in 2012, but it's even more relevant today, which is called The New Geography of Jobs by Enrico Morietti. And in that, he's an economist out of Berkeley, and he's got a lot of statistics. But one of them is the winning ecosystems, the winning cities and metro areas and counties and states, for that matter, have converted to the new age economy, which is all around the innovation economy. And so those who have made that conversion successful are thriving. The ones that haven't made that successfully are failing. And their wage trends are negative, their social problems are skyrocketing, and it's not a good picture. Orange County, as it turns out, is kind of in the middle, and our future is unwritten. Either we're going to go towards the negative trend, which is where our current trends are, or we're going to go forward. In order to go forward, we got to jumpstart the innovation ecosystem here. So what are the concepts? One of them is that for every innovation job you create 5 other jobs, 2 of which are high value professional jobs, 3 service jobs. Well, that's a multiplier effect unseen before.
That's right. Compared to like the manufacturing.
So manufacturing was 1.6.
Wow. So the multiplier effect,
huge. And part of it's because the wages of an innovation job are a multiple of the wages even of the best manufacturing jobs in the auto industry, for example. So it's lifting all boats. So unless you get that going, so the keys to getting that going, we're creating some clusters of talent. And if you get clusters of talent in an area like software engineering or AI or life sciences, etc., you actually become a magnet for more talent, and you become a magnet for industry to follow that talent. And it turns out, if you get that flywheel going, it's very difficult to move the cluster. In fact, you can't. It has to die on its own in order or you have to try to replicate it someplace else.
I mean, look in history. I mean, Detroit is still a pretty significant automotive center all these decades later, even though it's not necessarily the new innovations, but that's certainly a cluster example.
A perfect, and that at the time was a positive cluster,
right.
And was the driving force of much of the wealth creation in America, which started to decline starting in the late 1970s. So it was clear that if we were going to lift all boats, which is what happens in this innovation economy, we had to build a successful talent clusters and company clusters in areas where we could be distinctive.
Yes.
Okay. The couple of missing ingredients were we were producing a lot of STEM graduates, so it wasn't that our universities in Southern California weren't producing it. Where we were missing is one of the missing ingredients was capital. So it turns out that we're unique, Southern California, in a bad way, unfortunately, in that only 10 cents of every dollar that is needed to fund startups in Southern California comes from Southern California. 90% or 95% in the case of Orange County comes from outside of the area, which means that 95% of the profits and the gains leave the area.
That's right.
And so you're not creating that flywheel. So we said, okay, and without capital here, makes it harder for startups to get funded.
Right.
And oftentimes those startups will move to where the money is, or they get invested by money in some other location and they get moved. Now we're competing against most of the metro areas in the United States, whether it be Dallas, Seattle, Boston, New York, Chicago, all have multiples of VC money than they can invest local. 5, sometimes 20 times more money than they can invest. We are 10 cents. So we've got to solve this for this equation. If we can't solve this equation, we've got a problem. So we're weighing in. This is where the CLA can identify a gap and say, all right, how do we weigh in and try to solve that particular problem? And then help the other parts of the ecosystem, because it's not just one thing. It's a collaboration of things that have to occur to get into an innovation ecosystem.
That's right. So let's stay on this capital topic for just a moment,
Sure.
because as you think about people living here in Orange County,
Right.
they look around Orange County and there is almost unmeasurable wealth here in Orange County. The money is here. Mm-hmm. I think we probably would both agree that the money is just not either being directed toward early stage or venture risk and return types of opportunities, or they just don't understand that from the historical way in which the wealth has been created. So how do we educate or inspire the wealth that's here to orient toward opportunities that if we create those innovation jobs here, we're going to have a much more dynamic and thriving economy and community that will extend into future decades, because that's not guaranteed from where we sit. So how are we going to get these folks to be willing to back this next generation of entrepreneurs that we need here?
So that's the great question, and it's the mystery that a lot of people are trying to figure out. I challenge both BCG and McKinsey to weigh in on it. The best answer that we can all come up with is that Southern California the wealth creation here generally was related not to manufacturing as much as manufacturing or the old economy, even for that matter, or even the new.
Even somewhat easy.
And somewhat easy.
Although people probably wouldn't say
it
that.
wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about it was there are cycles here, so
Yes,
you either
that's true.
you have to exit at the right time,
That's
or else
right,
you have a
that's
little
right.
bit of a problem, or have long staying power.
Yes.
So the issue then that you raise is how do we get this what I call sideline capital to invest in what some people feel in that industry is going to Vegas. Okay, to invest in innovation. Now, first they get the concept that if we can get it going, that will create high-paying jobs, which means people will fill their offices, they will buy the homes they're producing, they will shop in their shopping centers, and it lifts all boats. And the real estate industry actually is probably one of the biggest positive recipients of this positive trend. But they've kind of so far have been in the background, kind of letting somebody else do it. So our big challenge is how do we show, and how do we use leadership to show, no, this is not only important for the real estate industry to get involved in, but it is a smart business and investment play.
Sure.
Right? So the way you do that is to start to support venture capital funds here, and we've created what we call as an OC master fund. That is a fund of funds, but a no-load fund of funds, which is raising capital in about $100 million bites. We're working on our first $100 million fund that will invest in and enable local VCs or VCs that we get to move here to get to scale. And unfortunately, the few VCs we have here are subscale, meaning they're well below 100 million in assets under management. And so we will be weighing in on our first two, Miramar and Visionaries, with up to 50% of their fund, which will get them over $100 million in funding, and then get some access to institutional money at some point, and also allows them to lead deals. And by leading deals, we get to control where they stay and where they live and all that good stuff. So, what we're trying to do, and we're starting with our corporations. And we're also starting with leaders in the real estate world who understand this. You can see examples of both Underwriting Company and 5 Points, for example, and there are others that Samuele is doing some wonderful things, and even right here, this office building next to both Sigersons and the creating this environment here are all good examples of what you need for infrastructure. And so the concept here is to get our corporations to weigh in and invest where they normally don't do, because venture capital is generally not on most corporations' radar screen.
Sure.
They do it for somebody else. And to pave the way, get the experience going, show that it works. It's a good return. It's a good return not just as a return on your capital, but it also creates this flywheel that we need to create, which will lift all boats in Orange County.
Dick, I think that is so key. And, as I think about it, one of the things that I say often is someone has to go first. And I feel like, I applaud you and the CLA group for really going first and saying, we'll be the pioneers of this, that it's not totally unproven. And there have been amazing companies created here. One of my early guests on the show has raised over $100 million for his software company here, Kyle, and none of it came from Orange County. And, when that has a significant exit and liquidity event, unfortunately, that money leaves. And I think that reinvestment mentality in the community that we're in is something that we just need to keep sharing. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that. I'm so hopeful that that's ahead of us. And thanks for leading that charge. So, You've been so successful throughout your career. You could have ridden off into the sunset and just enjoyed this next phase of life. What's inspired you to really dig in and lead this?
Well, you go back on a personal level and you find that the people that are happiest find their meaning in life and their purpose. Mm-hmm. And so this is utilizing the skills that I've developed over the years, applying it in a new way. But think how powerful it will be and can be and hopefully should be for the business world to realize that their purpose is not to create shareholder wealth, that's an outcome, but rather to make a better world in some way, to get their company oriented that way, their strategy, their structure. And we are making huge progress in getting even the investment community to say, we now realize, and Harvard did a study and validated it, we now realize that if we can find those companies that operate this way, they're outperforming their peers significantly. And so if we can not only get that concept across, but then get them working and collaborating together to solve social and economic problems, how powerful is that?
Yes.
And so we're really saying, hey, form groups in your local community. Even though all of our companies are multi-city, multinational, most of them, why are we weighing in locally? Well, if you can be the inspiration for the next city that you have an operation, for the CEOs in that city to follow what we're doing here, then that can happen there and that can happen in other cities. So in addition to the work that we're doing here, we will hold the first ever conference in 2020 here in Orange County of 40-some cities that have now formed CEO groups in various forms, all of which are struggling to figure out, how do we do this? How do we weigh in? How do we keep the CEOs engaged? How do we make a difference, et cetera? And so my view of if I look forward, is if we could get business, one, to shift their focus, and then two, to weigh in when we have such dysfunctional governments going on, and use basically data and facts to inform decision-making and get nonprofits, governmental agencies, universities, all collaborating and moving in the direction together, then you can really make a difference.
Yeah, that's amazing. And leadership is leadership. And, if we have it in our business community and in folks like you, I applaud you for pulling that together and standing up and taking the lead and not allowing the dysfunction and others to continue to perpetuate some of the problems that we all have to contend with. So thank you for that. Dick, I could sit here all day and talk to you about this. Unfortunately, Paul just gave me the sign. So we got to go to our final lap here at Accelerate OC for now, and hopefully we'll have a chance to continue this later. So I always ask my guests to share some key piece of advice or lesson that they've learned that they want to share with the audience. So what's the key piece of advice you'd love to share with other business leaders here in Orange County today?
So I would say, get involved. Come off the sidelines, realize that, you do create a purpose for your company. If you don't have one now, why do you exist? A higher calling to make the world a better place. Or you help your employees find meaning in work, okay, and unlock their passion. I'll tell you what, it is powerful to bring the heart to work. Do all those things, and you yourself will become more passionate about it and be a more effective leader. And one of the things I found is not only is it more fun to lead this way, it's far more effective.
Sure.
So I would challenge everyone to do that. And I also would say, read this book, the new Geography of Jobs by Enrico Morietti. It's really important for CEOs to understand in today's world how you compete, and where if you're not in an area where you can compete in this new form, you better figure out how to get engaged and make it happen.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for that. Dick, thank you so much for taking us along on this ride today, sharing some of your amazing career insights, and sharing that leadership story that is so clear in the way that you talk about the things that you've done and the things that you're doing now with CLA. Thanks for leading and inspiring others in our community, and really doing it by example, and being such a servant to so many others here. You're definitely doing your part to accelerate Orange County. Welcome to the family.
Thank you.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at CLAOC.com, or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's accelerate OC together.